So thank you for joining what is now our third deep dive for Bridge, which for those who are new or maybe need a refresher, Bridge is the marketing subcommittee for the MENA Fintech Association. Our mission overall is to win marketing a bigger seat at the table within the fintech industry within the MENA region. So there's a lot that we talk about in the sessions that we have and the events that we go to and the discussion within the WhatsApp community, which if folks are not part of that already, please sign up on the MENA Fintech Association website. But at a high level, that's really what we're all about. And the genesis of this committee that Nadia and I co-chair started from, I think, like a lot of our industry, a lot of the fintech industry, a conversation around, hey, we talk so much about product, we talk so much about technology, we talk so much about fun once you figure out the product. And so I think that's probably also a great jumping off point into the topic that we want to do today. A lot of people have, asked for us to discuss more, open up a platform for conversation around brand strategy and positioning. And I know I'm preaching to the choir, but a lot of the things that I hear and a lot of the conversations that I have in my role leading Rival as a marketing consultancy is a lot of people that fundamentally misunderstand the role of brands, and I think therefore are leaving opportunity for growth on the table because they think of brand as the thing you do after, as opposed to the thing that fundamentally connects or bridges the value of the product that you're building to the needs that exist in the market. And so we wanted to have a deep dive on this topic, and I might be slightly biased because he works at Rival, but I do really think that Adam is one of the best people to lead this conversation, both because of his expertise in brand building, but also because of a lot of the work that we've done in this space as Rival. So he's going to take you through some of the principles, some of the frameworks that we use, and also some of the examples from the work that we've done, and also what we see in the MENA region in the fintech category for what good looks like and how to get there with brand building and communication. So I'll turn it over to Adam. We are going to have ample time for questions at the end, so please keep those in mind or drop them in the chat and I'll keep track. And then we'll be able to facilitate the questions after he goes through the content. Thank you.
Great. Hello, everyone. I'm Adam. Can we see the screen? The right presentation, thumbs up from someone so I can see. Eric, thank you. Great. So yeah, thanks for having me. Looking forward to taking you through today. And I think without kind of further ado, I'll jump into it. I just want to make sure everyone has all their questions out today. So just following on from what Eric said, like we know really what the role of marketing is, and it's much more than coming at the end of the line. The job here is to positively impact revenue and key business results. And what we kind of need reminding of, sometimes, is brand is always in service of that. And it's our job to structure and then communicate how that is actually effective to business results, and communicate in the way that the C-suite and people in that side of the business can understand. And obviously it can be frustrating. Intuitively, we might know what good brand work is, and knowing that it's doing a job that it should do, but how that actually translates into the business and into the C-suite, can be difficult. And ultimately, it's down to us to connect what good brand work is that we know is intuitive to us to business results. And really, that means that everything we do needs to lead to incremental revenue. And we obviously, from our side, fundamentally believe that good work does that. But really, as brand leaders, that starts with how we influence the entire marketing chain. So that's upward from revenue impact and downward from the brand foundations and strategy we set. And really, it really starts with when we're setting out our brand foundations and when we're setting out our strategy, we need to clearly define what those strategic effects are. What are the changes that you expect to see and when? I've talked a little bit about indicators and KPIs, and that's, I think, these are very much important to, one, take a leadership position on, but also define, but also go further on in terms of specific measures. We don't want to leave things alone in terms of consideration or awareness. What might be the actual strategic effects that sit outside this that you might need to understand? Are customers behaving or communicating differently? Are they associating with certain things differently? Are they using different words? And all these kind of ripple effect of changes we need to understand but ultimately simplify into one strategic effect that we can hang our hat on. And that's really important and a kind of key piece that we need driving through. Obviously, we need to align on what indicators best monitor those strategic effects and make sure they're consistently measured and reported on. And obviously, there'll be a range here from people working on this kind of as individuals within a business and people working in agencies. What I would just say is making sure we always have a seat at the table and challenging what these monitors are, because it always needs to ladder down from what the exchange that we expect to have from doing these brand foundations and our strategic work. Third, investment in brand also means investing in the right ways to measure its impact, and they come hand in hand. I was always told in my career, when you think about $10 spent in brand, $1 should be spent on measurement. Now, that's quite an extreme view, but it really puts you in the right position to go, unless we've got the tools and thinking and investment in the way to do that set up, we're always going to struggle to connect this in the right way to the C-suite. Third, and this is more an internal piece, but it's super important, is keeping our briefs brief across everything. So what's the singular guiding thought? What's the change that we expect to see? And ultimately, what is the job to be done? And really, it can be as simple as that, because when you're handing off to teams or individuals, things start to get diluted and move away from what you do, and people start to revert back to the norm. And what we need to make sure of is we're actually driving that change all the way through the marketing chain, so it's simple and easier to connect to business results. And the last one, and this is kind of just an ongoing point, and I think goes back to what Eric was saying about the product and marketing kind of going together, and marketing operating just as much as an innovation function as a distribution function as well, is making sure we're talking to customers at regular part of what you do. One, because undoubtedly it's going to be part of the strategic effects that you expect to see. Ultimately, it's about the customers. And two, you might find insight that you hadn't expected, which means you need to optimize and shift on what you've already started to execute. So those just kind of my 5 kind of top thoughts before we go into kind of more the deep dive with the brand and communications work as well. So 3 brand and communications levers that we believe impact growth. And the first one is thinking about brands as an operating system. And often brands are seen as kind of static in place and live within a playbook. And we don't see it like that because really a brand needs to kind of update and upgrade as the world changes around it, as the market shifts, as new products come in, as audience, what creates meaning for audiences changes. So really we need to think of this as elements of the brand foundation that can update and change, but also sit with some fundamental components that are always true about what you do. So it's this combination between having a strong foundation that sets everything all the time and elements that will update over time to reflect the changes that obviously happen in the world. And this is the framework that we use, and obviously we'll share this round. And really it's geared, as you can see in the middle, to delivering a point of difference. And as I'll go on to in different parts of this presentation, particularly in fintech and financial services, really honing in on what a true point of difference is absolutely critical. So the way we look at this framework is kind of 4 key inputs. The first one, and super important, and one that gets kind of brushed over a little bit, is the brand ambition. What ultimately are you exist? Why do you exist? And ultimately, what are you trying to do as a brand? A kind of really important byproduct of kind of going through this framework is also the alignment you can get with the business, because this is a really key spot to get everyone in, including people from the C-suite, because you really need to understand what the brand exists, why the brand exists, and what it's expected to do. And I got an exercise that you can use on the next page to make that slightly less daunting and much more informative. But really, that's the first one. The next one, and we'll go into more depth on this in the second section, is really understanding what the priority need is of your audience, and thereby what is the challenge that you're looking to solve for. Now, this is a bit of a switch from the way that we typically look at things or are often looked at by brands, which is, what do I have in the world? What product do I have? And how does that benefit people? Rather than putting your brand to one side at the start and going, what are the needs that exist within that macro audience? And thereby, how can we define the challenge to solve for? And then you can move on to the next sections. And this is a really important piece as well. I mean, all of it's important, otherwise it wouldn't be on here. But the category convention, and essentially this is the common denominator of what all the brands in your competitor set are doing, the functional benefits they bring, and also the emotional. And having a really strong, clear perspective on what the market is doing is super important in order to be able to position yourself with a point of difference. And what you should be able to do here is, once you've written down what this convention is, you should be looking back to your audience challenge, that need, that unmet need, and go, that is why that unmet need exists. Because the market is either not doing well enough or failing to deliver against that need entirely. So really, when you're looking at these different elements, you should be going back through to the challenge, back to the ambition, and making sure each component is answering those individual pieces. And then you're looking at your customer value proposition and your brand positioning on its own. And really the question you're asking is, how are we uniquely delivering against that audience challenge and that unmet need? And obviously you're bringing in your product benefits, but more so it's the value of what those product benefits bring, not just the statement of what the product does, and thereby why someone you think is valuable to someone. And a really key element, and something I'll go on towards the end about kind of some key lessons, is really particularly in financial services and fintech, not just in B2B, but also in B2C as well, the emotion and meaning of brands and the kind of culture they can connect with is under-leveraged. So it's a really important area to explore within this and define what kind of key emotional tensions your brand can start looking to solve. Both of these combine to create your customer value proposition, not just leaning heavily on product. Then you can essentially look at the market convention and your customer value proposition, and in a singular statement, define what your point of difference is. And in the same statement, you should be able to see how you uniquely meet that audience need that you've prioritized and defined, and why the market doesn't meet that need. Now, these are all the internal components before you go out and think about messaging, communication, tone of voice, all of that. All of this needs to be thought through and done before you get to that stage. And we've seen brands, and again, particularly in this sector, who kind of jump ahead from a mission all the way over to kind of the brand platform and the messaging, what they want. And it becomes very, very difficult, and often, and which is why it gets frustrating, is not effective. So then we can look out, and what we want to be doing is creating a singular guiding thought, and that can operate as your slogan or tagline that encapsulates your point of difference in a really clear, sharp way. And that point, then you can start thinking about communications hierarchies and messaging hierarchies and the key messages for your audience, which is part 3 of today. I mentioned at the start talking about your ambition, and this is an exercise that you can do, which is really thinking about the type of challenger that you might be and asking people to input. So I've just left this here as an exercise that you can use. I've also included an example of how the Brand OS framework is filled out. So you can have a little look at this with Airbnb. But really, what's smart about their current strategy with Airbnb, which is belong anywhere, is they've created this point of difference against the market of hotels, which is Airbnb connect you with the world through travel, while hotels allow you to escape from it. Because Airbnb makes travelers feel like they can belong all over the world, whereas hotels are focused on disconnecting you from the worries of the world while you travel. And if you look back to the green box and that unmet need, it's your position, their position is meeting that need, while the hotel's position isn't meeting that need. Travelers don't know where to find ways to get closer or see different parts of the world, because what's in the market is actually removing them from that when they visit these places, whereas Airbnb is allowing you to actually experience those things firsthand. We'll probably drive this home. I've given it its own slide, but differentiation and that framework that we just went through is absolutely a kingmaker. So as Eric said, a lot of brands stop marketing at the product level when you need to actually market your point of difference. And this isn't just about going to market, it's actually bleeding through your entire business, from what the brand is in one sentence to how you come to life at events to the very kind of culture that you nurture. I think we have Asmik from Volt today. So hello if you're there. This is a project that we did with a financial planning and wealth creation blend. And what you'll be able to see is it should and does for us very much stand out versus the market. And I think what we were able to do at the start, and an exercise that we've used a few times, was one, that challenger piece, but really understand what that point of difference is versus the market and what we wanted to stand out against. An exercise that we used here, and one that you can use as well, is when you're thinking about your brand, how might it look, feel, sound in another category? And what we did here was, what might a financial services planning tool like this act and sound like if it was part of another category? And then creating this new brand and this point of difference, which really come across clearly in the sector. So second, and this is a super critical one, and changing how you think about audiences. So a natural place of where we have been taught to start previously is on demographics. Choose an audience and essentially go, this is who we're right for, and go after them. But really, as I started to say with that brand arrest, it's really about need state first. Demographics does come, but after need states and behaviors. And really, because that demographics kills relevance and scale. And I think the traditional audience way, focusing on demographics, can lead to detailed but really less actionable description. So pen portraits and stereotypes, and you end up with booklets or things that you don't really know what to do with. Versus if you're building around need states, it allowed us to understand how it can be valuable first as a brand, and then on to who they are. So that creates more relevant as well as tighter audience groups, and actually can have an impact on scale, because by choosing a demographic first, you're excluding anyone that might actually have a need for your product based on your intuition alone, rather than the needs that exist in the market. So that's a really important shift that needs to be made. The second one is around meaning. So most categories are actually missing how brands create meaning in today's world, and building communities around your brand, and creating influence with them. So this is actually from McKinsey, and it kind of shows this kind of transition from mass media and solving for reach, personalization and solving for effectiveness, and now more in the era of community, where we're actually solving for influence. And that's really because the way we interact with culture has changed. We're no longer kind of influenced by monoculture. So we're no longer influenced by specific major mainstream elements or individuals that kind of dictate how to think. You know, a good example is in fashion, where the influence of someone like Anna Wintour has kind of gone to the backbenches compared to what we'll go on to here, which is around communities of microcultures that are actually building meaning and fueling growth. So when we think of audiences, first we're thinking around needs, and then we're thinking around what might be the communities of microcultures that exist within those audience need groups. And really that's what starts to fuel growth. So there can be some large ones within here. It's not about being necessarily small. It's really about the size of the passion that they show. So Swifties is obviously a massive group, and the influence of that is significant. You can see what it's done to the NFL in one season of her kind of relationship in that space. But also there's a microculture called dark academia, which is really behind the major success of Wednesday on Netflix as the largest ever program on Netflix. So these microcultures are bubbling up and influencing what's happening in wider culture. So we've got two jobs to do when it comes to audiences, which is need states and meaning together is what's driving growth. So we're identifying the priority need of your audience and how you can uniquely meet that as a brand. And then we're providing value to your communities of microcultures by helping them express and grow their passions. And you're earning the right to be in there rather than broadcasting your message to them. And ultimately, what you want to start creating is whatever it means, user-generated content that starts to involve you. And these are the kinds of ripple effects and strategic effects that you want to have in place at the start. But both of these points together when it comes to audience is really a shift away from demographics and a shift away from kind of broadcasting message or hyper-personalization for effectiveness. So this is just an example from Claire, which is a digital bank, but really focused in the earned wage access or the early access to pay in the US. So at a starting point here, if we were working on kind of a demographic way of thinking, the audience would just be HR people in corporates in the US. Versus with us spending time thinking about what their needs might be, we actually unearthed something much more meaningful, which dictated the actual audience that we're going after. And critically, what position we created for the brand in order to uniquely meet that need. And that's the important point here. Demographics don't help you with your position, but understanding what your audience unmet need is does help you position your brand, because ultimately that is what the brand should be solving for. So rather than HR and corporates, the need is HR wanted to be more than transactional, but struggling to find the time, support, and partners for themselves to create a true partnership with employees, which is an audience of HR aiming to be partners in business and not just feel like they're part of a process. And now you've got a position to take within that audience for your brand versus having to create something out of the product benefits that you have. So it's a really important one here where demographics on its own kills relevance and scale, but also limits you because really what you need to be building your brand position around is an audience need to solve for. Into number 3, and obviously this is kind of an area that people want to jump into straight away when they think about affecting change, but really it comes after those first two elements. Those brand foundations as an operating system, shifting how you think about audience, and then you can start to create the right systems of communications which will impact growth. So 3 elements here, and kind of called it as putting your comms, messaging, and house in order. We need a communications framework that connects the business objective, whatever that is at the start of the year or longer term, through these identified communities that you have, the audience mindsets that they have, the tensions that exist for these people in the real world that you're looking to solve. And lastly, as I mentioned at the start, the jobs to be done. And this is a really important point. I'll come on to an example of where this was missed with someone I spoke to recently. From there, you can establish your messaging hierarchy. And what you want to do here is establish this from the value proposition, so what you're offering to the market, to the solution that's actually in action. And that will create effective and adaptable messaging across all types of business use cases. And what can happen a lot of the time is you've got a messaging structure that you need to recreate every single time a new audience or a new thing happens in the business. What you want is the combination of this communications framework and this hierarchy that will enable you to simply deliver that right across the business and different use cases. And from there, it's connecting us to GTM, and very much not something we go into today, but living within a really well-defined test, learn, structured agenda. So obviously this is something you can use kind of practically as a framework, and exactly what we use for clients as well. And really from top to toe, you can see how it starts with the business objective and goes all the way down to the key message that you're delivering for particular audience cohorts that exists within those communities that we have. And what's important that we have within here is this jobs to be done piece as well, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the framework, but the common way to think about it is I don't want to drill, I want a hole in the wall. So it's just going that extra level to understand what is the thing that the customer actually wants to be done. Is it doing something quickly, or is it actually achieving something for them that's going to affect change in the business? And we'll talk a little bit about speed and cost, which are a little bit endemic within financial services and fintech as well. And then next, you can have your brand messaging hierarchy. Now, again, this is a framework that we use for clients right out of producing the brand OS into the communications framework and then into your hierarchy. And again, you really want the simple statements here so you can govern the communications of the brand right across different areas, not just about campaigns, but for all areas of the business, both internally and externally. So you've got your value proposition. What's that key statement about what we're actually delivering? How are we different from the market? What is our story in a line? So that's your brand platform. And then you have what we typically use, kind of 4 messaging pillars that detail what your brand position is and value proposition is, ranging from identifying that problem to the solution in action. And critically, it's what are those proof points behind each? What are the reasons to believe that make those things true? I won't go through a full example, but I've included a filled out version in this deck as well, so you can see exactly how that's done for a real life fintech business. So I mentioned some common mistakes, and no one we've worked with is on this call, so it's fine to talk about. But as Eric said, and it is really endemic within this sector, is product really attempting to do it all, and this comes from the CEO downwards. So really need to make sure that marketing is being seen as an innovation function just as much as a distribution tool. But really, it starts with that brand OS framework where you can place product and the benefits and the values from that product into one section of what will create your brand position. It does not create your brand position on its own. The second is undervalue and under-exploring emotion. And this is very much true for B2B, just as it is from B2C. So really exploring what the changes or the emotional elements you bring to the table that will actually create meaning for your audiences, and that's a really important and under-tapped play. The bigger win is in B2B, and there's some doing it really well, which we can share. But again, a big one to focus on. There's a big difference between telling someone you're different and a compelling point of difference. They're very much not the same thing. I mentioned this earlier, but a lot of these kind of points get made across fintech and financial services is we're quicker, we're cheaper, we're bigger, we're better. These type of things are subjective. So although they might be true to you, you might know this to be true from the market that you've seen. No two people's perception of being fast or inexpensive are the same. So it's really quite hard to own, and really not something that you want to play on, because at the end of the day, it's speed is on how long is a piece of string. So you want to position around something that's ownable, that meets the need. And again, speed and cost rarely are the actual job to be done. They're just on a way to producing an actual impact for your customer. Trying to articulate messaging across multiple audience groups without these foundations is incredibly painful. So making sure you're going through these individual steps before you start creating a framework And often what we've seen done is the framework coming first and then trying to post-rationalize. That also doesn't work. So really just to make sure that we use our framework, there are others out there, but following that ambition through the audience need, what's your functional and emotional benefits? What's the same for the market? How are you different? And then what's the platform that you're using to communicate? Then you can go out, produce your communications framework and your messaging hierarchy and specific messages for go-to-market in your audiences. Another one that can happen quite a lot, and particularly conversations with C-suite, is not wanting to exclude potential customers. So you go, but our product could be right for developers, just as it could be right for the CTO, or it could just be right for mums, as it could be for younger people. This is why focusing on needs is really important, because it moves you away from where you might not be relevant to what's the priority need that we're solving for, and then how you're in a unique position to solve for that. And what can happen if you do this kind of jumbling of everyone we could possibly be about and trying to appeal to all, you end up as a jack of all trades, and it's very hard to differentiate. There's a few out there, and no one's perfect, especially with our critical eye. But WeoBank, why I pulled this one out, not just because it's big and successful, but certainly what they're doing now is the way they communicate is against an underlying consumer tension, taking a bit of a fresh perspective on the market, as seeing it as kind of overbanked and unnecessarily complex, and putting things in the language people can understand, rather than selling the benefits and how quick and powerful these things are, which is endemic across the business, even with B2C. They're using things as banking as smart as your phone. You're going back to my phone's part of my life. It's seamless. It's easy. It makes sense to me. Why is banking not as simple as that? Rather than banking made easy, you're giving people a way in that solves a tension that exists for them. But also when it comes to that kind of the brand platform, which is created to reboot banking, it's basically challenged that there's something fundamentally wrong that doesn't work for businesses and for customers. And it's not even saying it's broken a certain way, it's asking people to find out. So a really interesting one, but I liked it because of the way that it plays on that consumer tension. And the last one, and obviously we do this a lot, especially if you listen to the podcast as well, which is, what are kind of 5 things to take away here? So first and foremost, and a really important exercise, if you haven't done already, is get alignment around the ambition of the brand. Use the challenger exercise to help. But what you might find is people think they want to be different things. And that's a great discussion to have, especially with people from the C-suite, because it gets it all out on the table. And obviously, if you don't have that, you end up against blockers and makes it more difficult as you progress through the work. Communicate your point of difference, not your product benefits. And when we're thinking about product benefits, don't leave them alone. Think about what those benefits enable. And then from what they enable, what's the ultimate value that they're creating? So it's not just that point of difference and product benefits. It's going further on what those functional elements are of your product. I know there's a whole section, and I'll say again, we want to shift from audience demographics and effective reach to defining need states and the priority needs you're solving for, and creating meaning with communities of microcultures. Fourth, we want to establish the strategic effects early on and upfront that Brandware is expected to make, and hanging our hat on these and connect these through the chain to business results. And the way that works, especially as you start to involve more people or agencies, is you need to sit in on those different elements and not just pass off to a media team, to a search team, to an event team, whatever it may be. You need to stay close to that in order to ensure that the strategic effects that you need to see are going to be monitored. So ultimately, you can connect that to those business results and revenue down the line. And lastly, create a communication framework that includes these elements, the existing mindset of the audience, critically the job to be done, and the tensions that exist in the real life for the market. And having that on one page will not only govern the marketing, but help govern the business as well, and drive it towards a kind of singular destination.
you.